Hello everybody. Today's review is a little bit of a last-minute, semi-planned affair. It's a bit of a Brucey bonus for us all, because I am behind the wheel of a 2001 BMW E39 530i. And this car would fit into any number of different category of video that I run here on the channel. You could call it almost an affordable classic. We'll get onto that in a minute. But I think I'm going to go with the cool cars for young people tagline, because this has been brought to me by channel fan Sinjin, who's 25 and has upgraded to this from a 1.4 litre Corsa. So from me, and I'm sure most of the other people here on the channel, well done. There are quite a few questions that I get on a frequent basis, some of which I have an answer for, some of which I do not. Like, for example, what's the best car you've ever driven? Get asked that one probably more than any other, and I really should have an answer. But one question I can answer very easily is when people say to me, what's the car you regret selling? Well, high up on that priority list has to be my old E34 530i that I nicknamed Callisto. Now, that was the previous Generation 5 series to this, easily identifiable as being the last one with the classic 4-round headlight layout that BMW and many other manufacturers used. And that car was very odd in that it had a small displacement 3-litre V8, designed really for the American market, and that engine served as a stopgap until they designed a new 6-cylinder. The E39 was a pretty big leap on from the old 34. Both stylistically and technologically, it was a hell of a jump. This car's filled with stuff that now we really take for granted, but at the time was certainly not a given. So you have cruise control. Yes, I know it had been around for a while, but wasn't in every car that you drove. You have parking sensors, you have heated seats, and you also have a very modern and actually fairly well-behaved 5-speed automatic transmission. These were also available with a 5-speed manual, but trying to pick one of those up is relatively difficult if you want a 530i. But it tells you an awful lot how times have changed, where the only 4-cylinder you could have this with was the base 520D 2-litre diesel. All of the rest were either straight 6 or V8. The 530i has probably one of the best engines they ever got. It's BMW's M54, the same thing you'd have found in the 330i E46. It's an engine that's well known for being smooth, tractable, has just the right amount of power, about 230 horses, about 220 odd pound-foot of torque, and it's very durable. There were smaller capacity petrols available right down to a 2-litre, but because they were essentially the same architecture, they're not actually any more frugal, they are just much weedier. And one of the criticisms that Sinjin had with his old 1.4 Corsa was on those rare occasions when he did agree to transport all of his mates about, the car really did suffer. Whereas this, you can stick all the lads in, all your gear, and you're absolutely fine. The car doesn't really even notice. Also, Sinjin is a submariner, and that means he has a rather unusual commute. He will travel either 200 miles at a time, or quite a bit further if he has to go up to Scotland. This meant that he wanted something fairly comfortable and relaxing, and I have to say, this car does that bit pretty well. I've driven down this road many times today, and I've got to say, this is without a doubt the most comfy I've been thus far. On many occasions, I have actually considered buying one of these, and I am the sort of person that would desperately want one of the bigger V8 engine cars. They did one with a 4.4 litre unit that was the precursor to the engine you got in, say, the BMW 645 and the later E60 545. But trying to find one of those with a manual is very tricky. As it is, trying to find one of these with a manual is actually not that easy. But Sinjin correctly pointed out that the problem with most of the manual cars is they've been bought by people that do want to drive them rather hard, meaning that cars like this have been left to those who don't worry about the performance aspect so much and therefore have taken a little bit better care of their cars. This one, aside from a fairly meaty wobble at about 40 miles an hour, it's actually behaving itself pretty well. It's displaying many of the classic hallmarks of a car of this age and price, and it's got a bit of lacquer peel, the odd dent, a few stone chips, and one of the lights at the back had to be replaced because somebody stole it. The colour choice is a bit of a brave one, isn't it? But in all honesty, I rather envy it. When I was his age, he's only 25, I'd have just wanted black on black, or anything on black, really. I was not particularly adventurous as a young man in terms of my colour choice. But actually, this works quite well. The exterior is Chiarotto Red. I did a quick bit of research, and apparently that's a type of rosé wine from a particular region in Italy. I'd appreciate it if somebody in the comments can tell me if that's true or not, or Google's just making it up. But the car actually really rather suits it. I also rather like these 16-inch wheels that it's wearing. This is an SE car, so you've got quite a few extras and nice things over the base model, like the leather interior. Probably also got you a slightly better stereo, although this is still the BMW Business CD. Cruise control might also have been part of that, but honestly, it's been so long since I've studied these things in any detail, I've rather forgotten. Currently, the only thing I really dislike about this car is the rattle from this door card over here, so if you can hear that, I do apologise. Another one of the things that 25-year-old me would have insisted on having was the sport trim, mostly because it looked better. You had different bumpers, sexier alloys, and it was a bit lower. The problem there, though, is that then it rides that much worse. And the fact is, this is never really going to be a particularly sporty thing. As you put your foot all the way down, if you insist on pushing it down a road, I would say that the 5 Series is a car which is competent. It certainly handles better than many of its peers, it's got better weight distribution than the Audi, a little bit sportier than the equivalent Mercedes, but it's not really going to amaze you or your mates. It is a cruiser at the end of the day more than anything else. Try and throw it round a bend like your Corsa and you may find yourself in some trouble. These cars are also now in a very perilous state. They can still be had reasonably cheaply, only a couple of £1,000s to get you into one of these, or a little bit less if you want to be very brave, and a bit more if you want to play it safe. They made them for about 9 years and they were big sellers, so they're reasonably commonplace. But that is the same thing that can be said of many cars which are now considered proper classics. And I noticed the other day that there is a garage selling an M5 for, wait for this, over 50,000 quid. For a long time I remember it that 10 grand got you into an okay E39 M5 and 20 grand would get you into an absolutely mint pristine one. I've no doubt that the 50 odd grand is probably a somewhat optimistic price being asked by a garage with a reputation for optimistic pricing. However, that's going to set a precedent. People will be looking at that and going, these cars are desirable now, aren't they? And I would certainly be lying if I told you that a regular 5 Series is ever going to command anywhere near the same amount as the M. But the trickle-down effect will certainly apply, because people will be looking at that and going, yeah, the M5 was pretty cool, but actually, wouldn't it be really nice if you could find something like the aforementioned manual 540i, a very rare thing in any case, actually probably much rarer than the M5. It's a very cool, usable daily. Now, they're not going to be the cheapest things to run because, contrary to popular belief, German engineering is not infallible. However, this car was built at a time when BMW were putting things together reasonably well. It's generally agreed that after this generation of cars is where the accountants really took over at BMW, and although the E60 is still a very fine thing, I don't think it's ever going to be seen with the same warmth as the E39. It's a very classically styled car, got that real old school BMW look about it, and particularly in a colour like this, I can see it being a reasonably desirable thing one day in the near future. It will not be an infallible car, and you will need to spend money on it, especially if you are buying one that's a little bit cheap, because it probably won't have had the most maintenance thrown at it in the last few years. However, one of the good things about a vehicle like this being made in a fairly large number is that all of their problems are now fairly well known. That doesn't mean that you're not going to get them, but when you do, the solution should hopefully be fairly easy to find. So if you are a sort of DIY hands-on type, working out how to keep the car going shouldn't take too much effort. I can't say the same thing if you want to go and buy, say, an old Italian car from the same period. Fuel economy is decent too, this car having averaged 28.5 to the gallon. That's pretty decent for a fairly big car with plenty of room in it, and it does have plenty of room. The 3 Series of the time has enough for 4 people, but this is appreciably better if you do put anyone in the back. Boot is also absolutely massive. You may also find, and here your mileage will vary, that a 5 Series could be just a little bit cheaper to insure as a young person than a 3 Series. I'd love to tell you how much St. John is paying for this, but he's just added it to a multi-car policy, so the figure I would give you would not be at all representative of a real-world sum if you were going to go out and buy one today. I am generally very wary of anybody on the internet who proclaims to have a crystal ball and an ability to tell you what's going to be in demand in the near future. Because let's be honest here, if any of us really had that, we'd all have sheds full of Cozzies we picked up when they were £5,000. But with this, at an asking price that is very, very reasonable, your exposure is fairly limited. You put in only a few £1,000s and that's all you really stand to lose. And if in the next few years it's not suddenly worth twice as much, what you are still going to have is a decent, fairly good looking, classically styled, very nice engined piece of German engineering that I think a lot of people will look at and go, yeah, I remember those. They were good cars. As it happens, these already seem to be disappearing from the streets at a very fast rate, so if they are going to become a classic, I think it's going to happen pretty soon. So, what do you think? Could I be onto something? Or is this just more nonsense and speculation from a crazed YouTuber who's got no idea what he's on about? Let me know in the comments down below. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We'll see you for the next one. Bye-bye.